Okay, so while we're on the subject of sleight of hand and moves that I'll do, most of you who are familiar with my work know that most of it doesn't require sleight of hand. But I do acknowledge that there is a time and a place for everything, and there is a small number of sleights that I will use under certain circumstances. I've had requests recently from various magicians who have watched me perform this that they want me to make a tutorial video on how my personal handling of the Hofzinser under the spread control, okay, the bottom cull. And I don't know if this is a huge departure from the way most people do it, but I've received, for some reason, a lot of compliments by magicians on my particular technique. So I thought I'd take a few minutes and share exactly the way that I do this. If I'm working one-on-one with a participant, I might say something like, well, you know, magicians, they have ways of making you take the card that they want you to take. So we're not going to do it that way. I want you to be as picky as you'd like. And as a matter of fact, I'm just going to go through these cards very, very slowly, all right? And I'm honestly not trying to influence you. So anytime you just get the urge, just simply place your finger on the back of any of these cards as you see them go by. So you can be as picky as you want. So like I say, I'll go very, very slowly, and eventually they will place their finger on the back of some card. Now, before I go any further, I always take a moment to establish some things. I say, do you think that I could know what this card is? Do you think I could have possibly influenced you to touch this particular card? Would you like to change your mind? And by the way, they can change their mind. And if they do change their mind, I say, okay, I'll keep going. Anytime you're ready, you just touch the back of a card. Anyway, eventually they'll touch a card, and I make it a habit normally of turning my head away and showing them the card, all right, saying, this will be your card. Are you still happy with this card, or would you like to change your mind? I give them yet another opportunity to change their mind. Anyway, most of the calling action happens as I lower the cards into this position, and of course I've already controlled it to the bottom. Now that should have been invisible from the front if I've done it correctly. So what am I doing here that might be a little bit different from the norm? Whenever they touch their card, as soon as we've settled on one, and I separate the cards in my right hand, I keep the cards in my right hand spread somewhat, and the selection, I push it to the right with my left thumb about as far as I can, maybe about half the width of the card below it. That accomplishes a couple of things for me. One thing is that when I tip it up, it becomes unmistakable what index they're supposed to be looking at, all right? So I tip it up, and then I use the spread of cards in my right hand to just the left, from my perspective, the left edge of the bottom card of the right hand, and notice that these are still in a spread condition, to just tap that and say, I'll need you to remember that card for just the next couple of minutes, okay? And I lower these cards into this position, and now all I have to do is push the rest of them to the right with my left thumb, and that card is totally under control. I want to point out that mentally, a couple of things are happening for me here. One of the differences is that unlike what you'll normally see, I do not actually pull that card to the right in the spread. That is the traditional technique, and what I find is that very often, if you do a pulling action, that card will either end up jutting out the back or the front, and the participant might actually see it scoot over in the process. So I keep that card stationary, okay? So what is actually moving, believe it or not, like I say, I push this way over to the right, and that gives me a lot of clearance, and I think of all of the cards in my right hand as if they are one object, one solid object. So when I tap that and they come together, what I do is, as I'm lowering my hands, and I'm going to try to slow this way down for you, I just make contact with my right hand middle finger, just to be secure that I have control over that card. And then, rather than thinking of pulling it to the right, what I'm doing in my mind is I'm taking all of the cards above it, okay, the ones that were in my right hand, and they just move a little bit to the left, all as one unit. As I then sort of move my left hand even more to the left and say, again, are you satisfied that that was a free choice, okay? So again, their card has been called to the bottom, all right? So again, not not pulling, not culling like that, okay? That usually causes problems from the front. Okay, so one last time, push this card way forward. Think of the cards in my right hand as one unit. Tap, tap, coalesce, lower the cards into this position, and I am taking all of the cards that were above the selection and moving them a little bit to the left as I lower them, thinking of them as one object. At that point, I can just continue spreading cards and ask them if they're satisfied or if they would like to try again. And at this point, of course, their card is called to the bottom. One thing that I'd also like to mention is that sometimes when I do this, you know that most of the time I consider what I do to be just fairly pure mentalism. But one of the nice things, depending on the participant and the type of person that I think I'm working with, is that when you cull the card to the bottom, it's pretty easy to get a little pinky separation there. And if you have my book Asymptotes, you're aware that that sets you up perfectly to do what's called the Cabolo maneuver, where you put the cards right back into the card box. And the interesting thing is that in so doing, I've loaded their card right onto the face, but it's because I'm holding the cards in this direction and I close the flap, I'm staring right at their card, so I know what it is. But as far as they're concerned, they peeked at a card in the middle, it remained in the middle, and then the entire deck of cards was just simply replaced back in the card case. So sometimes I'll have the participant hold out their hand like this, face down and rigid, and I'll balance the entire deck of cards carefully on the back of their hand. And I ask them to imagine that there's like a little votive candle with a flame right there. And I have them visualize their card, just one detail at a time, like the color, the suit, and so forth, number card or picture card in the flame. And then I tell them to blow out the candle, and they go, whew, and I pretend to read the smoke, and then I name the actual card that they were thinking of, and then, of course, they're freaked out and impressed. And then I say, hand me the deck, and they pick up the deck of cards, and somehow impossibly there is one card balanced on the back of their hand. And obviously you can see how this could play as a pretty strong mental magic trick, because the one card that they merely thought of, that I divined, has somehow penetrated not only through the entire deck of cards, but through the card box, and when they turn it over, it is the very card that they were thinking of. And again, this most definitely is mental magic. I'm not calling this mentalism, but it's something that I will occasionally do with the right participant. And again, like I said before, there's a time and a place for everything. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this little tutorial. I hope you found something in it that you can use, and that's all for now. Bye-bye.